Welcome to Strengths Champion Solutions, where we help you grow stronger, work smarter, and lead wiser. I'm your host, Brent O'Bannon, and today my question for you is, what do you believe is the most underrated leadership superpower? Love to hear your responses in the chat below. So in my research, one thing that triggered me was an email from a client who is a doctorate level leader. And when she sent this particular email to me, it really surprised me what she felt was an underrated superpower of leadership. When I began to read the article, it really resonated with me. And today I wonder what you would list as the most underrated leadership skill there is. In this particular article, which was from the Harvard Business Review and research that originally was done in 2018, so a good while ago, the superpower is self-awareness. Now, I know it's easy to roll your eyes and just kind of like, yeah, I've heard this before. Self-awareness in leadership is important. However, I think it's important to dive deeper in understanding that there are two types of leadership self-awareness. And if you'll see in this matrix, a 2x2 that I've created here on this particular slide in front of you, number one, you're going to see on the left-hand side that you're going to go from low to high on internal self-awareness. That is the first part of self-awareness. That is the one I think most people are most aware of. But if you'll notice on the bottom of my slide, there is another part of self-awareness. There is a low to high in external self-awareness. And then from this 2x2, the Harvard Business Review has actually created 4 different archetypes of self-awareness. And I would love for you to evaluate yourself as a leader, maybe your organizational leadership, and maybe you want to invite me in to do an actual workshop or a training with your executive team or your So when we talk about that, may have just lost you there for a moment with my internet. So when we talk about self-awareness, realize that first of all, if you start with low internal self-awareness and low external self-awareness, this is what we call the seekers. Seekers are those people who really have not invested much time pondering, asking hard questions about what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, what are my values, what are my biases and preferences, what energizes me. One of the questions I love to ask leaders is what annoys you the most? Because when you know what annoys you and what energizes you, you find out more about how you're really wired genetically, as well as what kind of social influences have made the biggest impact on you. I remember when I first started as a licensed professional counselor many years ago, going through my master's program in counseling psychology. It was an incredible time of discovering internal self-awareness. I was not that old as a parent. I had not been married that long yet. And so there were so many questions that I still have about who Brent O'Bannon really is and who I'm really not. Now, again, internal self-awareness continues on for a lifetime. Now, some of you have never even been curious or spent any kind of time or used any kind of tools to help you to contemplate and really discover who you are. I remember creating a tool many years ago called Who Am I? And in that particular tool, I asked all kinds of not only strengths-based, but also trauma-based questions to help people understand their own blind spots and their own strengths. But there is another part of self-awareness that is external self-awareness. And it's true, you can be actually low in both. And so people with external self-awareness, what that means is that you actually ask other people for feedback. You might ask them, first of all, what are the top 3 words that you would use to describe my personality? What are the top 3 ways that I am most helpful to other people? Those are the types of questions that are strengths-based, where you're strength spotting. Also, though, part of external self-awareness is asking, what do you think are my top 3 blind spots? What do you think are my top 3 weaknesses? What are the top 3 things that annoys you about me the most? Now, when you start asking other people, you don't want to just ask one group of people. Sure, you want to ask a spouse. You want to ask your kids. You want to ask extended family members. You want to ask your associates at work, your peers. You want to ask your manager, your supervisor. You want to ask those people that maybe you play tennis with or golf with, or you have a hobby with. In other words, you want to get this 360 feedback all around you. Now, I realize that there's pros and cons about 360 feedback. However, for sake of gaining self-awareness, we need to know, what do other people think, feel, and say about us? So if you're a seeker, that means you really are a dangerous place. That's why I've given it a red here. You need to stop and start pondering quickly, who are you and who do people say you are? And by the way, who people say you are is only their perceptions. However, part of self-awareness is knowing people's perceptions. You know, it's interesting. I was facilitating a group not too long ago. And every time I facilitate or every time I coach, I know there are certain things about people that there's a blind spot. They don't even see it. They don't even recognize it about themselves. But I also know that's true about me as a leader. Now, let's go to the next one. So the next one is what we call the introspectors. These are the people that are high in internal self-awareness, but low in external self-awareness. So at least they've done the inner work. They've begun the process of discovering what their likes and dislikes are, what their preferences are, etc. Now, it's interesting. And by the way, on each of these 2x2s, you can see, you can score yourself. Am I low? Am I moderate? Am I high? So even as an introspector, you could say I'm moderate in my self-awareness, my internal self-awareness. But this person is very low as an introspector. So, by the way, research has shown that people who ponder and do deep thinking and introspection about themselves without getting feedback from external self-awareness tend to have skewed self-awareness. So in other words, it's one dimension, but by itself, it can actually be a blind spot. And if you think about it, we have a narrative, we have stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. That doesn't necessarily mean it's accurate. It is our preferences, it is our biases. So that means the introspector really needs to take a risk. How can I begin to ask people for feedback? And again, it doesn't have to start with negative feedback or critical feedback. Start with the strength. Start with that which is right with you. Then there is the third archetype. These people are what we call the pleasers. That's the green. And the green, the pleasers, are those people who are high in what we call external self-awareness, but they are low in internal self-awareness. And the reason we call them pleasers is because they figure out what people expect and what they want, and then they attempt to meet the needs of those people. And many times they have certain attributes that they want to be known for, and they will seek that feedback from other people. However, one of the complications of a pleaser is that other people may say you are very friendly, but yet there may be a part of you that really is annoyed about people. And you haven't admitted it to yourself. You haven't shared it with anyone else. You are secretly having a blind spot. And so that's why we say a pleaser could become a doormat, is because that person is pleasing everyone else, but not aware of their own needs, their own wants, their own frustrations, their own aspirations, their own desires. So again, there is an out of balance there. Ultimately, what we're looking for is that upper right corner, and that is to be aware. So you could think about this person as an enlightened leader. And so there is a high growing awareness that is internal, yet there is this high awareness of getting external feedback. And by the way, research shows that the people who are the most experienced and the most confident many times are closed to the 360 feedback from other people. And this is a shame, because many times I think, for example, myself, I'm a master certified coach, the highest level of coaching credential that you can get. I've been in this field for 20 plus years. It doesn't mean I know it all. It doesn't mean that I don't have blind spots. It doesn't mean that I've fallen into ruts that I'm not even aware of in my coaching, in my facilitation, in my speaking. So, even recently, I remember coaching a particular individual, and we were talking about a particular strength called command, which is number 4 for me. And she had someone in her life that also had high command. And so we started talking about how the command clashed with some of her values and strengths. And then I reflected back to her and asked, how has my command come up to you? And so this particular client began to open up on a couple of questions that were very pushy. And she felt offended by these questions. And just by having that open conversation back and forth with each other, it really was helpful, because it helped me to understand where her tender spots are, those spots where maybe she felt offended, and how I needed to manage my command. And by the way, that wasn't new to me, that I have that part of me. I've known that feedback about myself, especially through using Clifton Strengths and asking other people who I trust and will speak the truth in love. But my point in sharing that story is that it provoked a new desire inside of me to ask more feedback. Not too long ago, I asked people, about 15 or 20 of my coaching clients, to write down and send to me the top 3 words that described my coaching style. And by writing down, almost everybody wrote those 3 words, and I began to see patterns of certain words that described my coaching style. So today, what would you say is your most dominant archetype out of these 4? Number 2, I'm going to ask you, where are you low and where are you high in internal versus external self-awareness? And number 3, what are some potential next steps for you to grow in internal versus external self-awareness? If you would like to have a discussion, set up a time at Ask Brent Anything. If you'd like to have me teach or to share on this topic, feel free to reach out to me through my website at BrentO'Bannon.com. And by the way, Corey, who put one secret leadership superpower, he said empathy. Absolutely, there's no doubt that empathy is underrated. And many times it's perceived as weakness when really it is a superpower. And by the way, if I was to ask Corey a couple of follow-up questions, I might ask him, where would you put a leader who is strong with empathy in their internal self-awareness and their external self-awareness? How could a person have a blind spot even with empathy? So no matter what strengths we have, what experiences we have, we want to continue the process of developing our internal and external self-awareness. So until next time, I hope you discover more about yourself as well as work smarter and lead wiser. Take care, everyone.